If you've never heard of a VPN, it stands for Virtual Private Network. It hides your IP address from hackers, corporations, and government agencies by encrypting your online activity. When you use NordVPN, it's like you're going online through a tunnel that keeps your information completely hidden. It is so simple to set up. With just one click, NordVPN will keep you safe from threats such as malware, trackers, and ads on your computer, phone, and tablet. Now you can get protected risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, you'll get 4 months free on a 2-year plan. Get the exclusive deal here by using the link down below in the description box. I have personally been using NordVPN for quite a while, and I am extremely grateful to have that level of protection. Especially since with each passing day, I've noticed that scams seem to become more and more sophisticated. Lately, I have received quite a few emails from what looks like companies that I know, and they tell me, here is the invoice for your order. And I have to admit, the first time I saw something like that, I was thinking, what did I order? I didn't order anything from there. And the first instinct is to click on it and see. But it turns out that that's a scam. Luckily for me, though, I am protected with NordVPN. I highly recommend that you make sure that your online activity is safe as well. Get the exclusive NordVPN deal by clicking the link in the description box below. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, you'll get 4 months free on a 2-year plan. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the case. Tonight, we are headed to Oregon. Shout out to all my friends in Oregon. Now please stick around at the end of this case for some extended mic brushing to help you sleep. Now this case took place in 2016, and it is the case of Kaylee, Sawyer, and Edwin Lara. Let's start with some background on Kaylee. She was born on March 2nd, 1992, in Central Oregon in a town called Bend. She had 2 loving parents and 4 younger brothers. She was a smart, strong, and funny person. She had many interests, including photography, drawing, poetry, and snowboarding. By July of 2016, Kaylee was 23 years old. She was working as a dental assistant. She was also attending college at Central Oregon Community College, and she was living with her boyfriend, whose name was Cameron Reemhofer. Now, on Saturday, July 23rd, Kaylee had gone out that night to a bachelorette party with her friends, and they had gone to a club in downtown Bend. Apparently, while she was at the club, she was seen dancing with a man other than her boyfriend, who was not at the party. And somebody felt the need to call Cameron and tell him that Kaylee was dancing with someone else. past midnight now, so it was actually July 24th. And they began arguing in the car as they drove back to their apartment. And they were both very upset. And when they got home, he got out of the car and went inside while she decided to sit in the car because, she was upset. And after he had been inside for about 10 minutes, he decided, it's enough already. Let me go outside and tell her to come in. It's late at night. She's sitting in the parking lot. So he goes out and she's not in the car. And he looks around and he doesn't see her. So he calls her up on her cell phone. He tells her to come home, and she says no, she doesn't want to right now. She's, walking down the street, and her phone's about to die, and she's angry, she's upset. Shortly after that, her phone turned off, and he was not able to reach her. So he got in the car and he drove down the street looking for her, and he didn't see her. Now, keep in mind, the neighborhood where they lived was considered a safe neighborhood, but still, you never know. So she had a car as well, but she had parked her car at a friend's house when they had all left together to go to the bachelorette party. So he went over to that friend's house, and Kaylee's car was still there. And he spoke to her friends, and no one knew where she was. He spoke with her family, and nobody knew where she was. So he immediately called the police, or he called 911, and told them that she was missing, told the story. Now, I have to admit, from all the cases I've done, he sounds a little suspicious, right? He's the boyfriend. They got in a fight. He was jealous. And now he's calling to say she's missing. So, me personally would be thinking, hey, I wonder if he did something. Meanwhile, Kaylee's mother also called 911 to report her daughter missing. And everyone was interviewed by the police. They did not think that Cameron was guilty of anything. They believed his story. And they declared her a missing person. And the story was on the local news. Now, on Monday, July 25th, so remember, the bachelorette party was on the night of the 23rd. It was after midnight on the 24th when she went missing. Okay, so now it is Monday, the 25th, and the police get some information, which is quite troubling. A woman named Isabel Lara, who was a rookie police officer from Bend, she had some information to share, and she came down to the station and she was interviewed. She told them that her husband, whose name was Edwin Lara, he was a 31-year-old man. He worked as a security guard at the community college, the same community college where Kaylee went. And he was a Honduran national who had legal status in the U.S. So she said that he had worked his normal shift at the college campus on Saturday night, the 23rd. And he came home after midnight on Sunday and went to bed as normal. The next morning, they woke up early and went to church as they always do. He was a very religious person. Religion was one of the most important things in his life. So she said that when they went to church, he was acting a little weird, very quiet, but she didn't ask him That's what he said. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I hit her with the car. So Isabel explained that Edwin, who drove a security vehicle at the school, claimed that he had accidentally hit her with the car and killed her, and then he had panicked and dumped her body, and that he had brought home her belongings and had put them in their shed outside the house. After that, he grabbed Isabel's gun and he took off in his car, and she didn't hear from him again. So the police immediately headed over to their house to look in the shed, and they found Kaylee's purse, and it was stained with blood, and all of the contents of her purse were still there. They also found clumps of blonde hair covered with blood, as well as a boulder covered with blood, and it no longer seemed likely that he had just hit her with his car, and it no longer seemed that she was just a missing person. So they changed the status of the case to a homicide investigation at this point, and they had the awful task of telling this new information to Kaylee's family. Now, the police asked Isabel for some more information about Edwin. Like, was he violent? Was he an angry person? Did he have a drinking problem? And she said that he used to drink, but he had quit drinking when he had gone back to church, and she did not know him to be violent. They had been going through some marital difficulties because he had recently cheated on her, but they were working on getting through it, and he was extremely apologetic. Meanwhile, that same night, Monday the 25th, a 19-year-old woman named Andrea Mass finished her job at Ross Dress for Less in Salem, Oregon, which was just a couple hours northeast of Bend. She came out of her place of work. She went to get into her car, and as she got in, somebody else also got in on the passenger side. It was Edwin Lara. So he got in, he shut his door, and he told her to drive or else he would kill her. And he had a gun, and he also had a bulletproof vest and a backpack. So she had no choice but to listen to him. And they started driving, or she started driving. She had driven for about an hour when he told her to pull over. He wanted to drive because he didn't like the way she was driving. It made them look suspicious. So he got her into the passenger seat and he handcuffed her to the gear shift. And he drove for a few hours until he decided it was time for them to stop for the night at a motel in southern Oregon. So he made her pretend to be his girlfriend, and they got a room, and he handcuffed her to the bathroom door while he took a shower. And then he told her to take a shower, but she refused. And so he unhandcuffed her from the door, and he handcuffed her to the bed frame. And he forced her to take sleeping pills. He said if she didn't take them on her own, he would force them into her. He said he had syringes. So she took the pills, but she told herself she would investigation for her STD, sexually transmitted disease. And then she went on to tell him the disgusting details of the illness in hopes that he wouldn't want to catch it. And she was right. He didn't want to catch it. He didn't touch her again. But a moment later, his own phone started ringing, and he started talking to someone in Spanish, which she didn't understand. But she saw that he started to become paranoid, and he insisted that they leave at that moment, and it was just around 1 a.m. now. So he unhandcuffs her, he drags her back out to the car, and they hit the road. And several hours later, her car starts to leak oil, and he needs to get a new car. And of course, many times she asked if he could just leave her wherever, and go on his own. But he made it clear that she was serving as a human shield in case the police would find him. They would not shoot him so long as she is there. So he pulls over at a small motel in California. The town was called Eureka, and he told her that they were going to steal a new car. So they see an elderly man standing outside of his car, and Edwin and Andrea go up to the man, and Edwin holds up his gun, tells the man to give him his car keys, and the man screams. So Edwin shoots him in the stomach. I don't think he really intended to do that, but the screaming must have startled him, because after he shot the guy fell down. He ultimately would survive, just so you know, luckily. But I guess there was too much, noise and commotion for him to take the car at that point. That's why I'm saying I don't think he intended on shooting the man. So he grabs Andrea by the hand and they start to run. They run to the gas station next door, where they see a family with a car. It was 17-year-old Nima Gavimi, his grandmother, and his younger brother in the car. They were waiting for Nima's father and grandfather, who were inside using the bathroom. They had been driving back to Los Angeles after a trip to Canada. So Edwin threw Andrea into the car. He got in, he shut the door, and he insisted that Nima start driving, or else. He said, "Drive or I'll shoot." So Nima, who only just had a driver's permit, started driving. His grandmother started screaming in her native language, which was Farsi. And it was hard to get her to calm down, because apparently she didn't understand what was going on, and she didn't speak English. So as they drove, Edwin started making some small talk. According to Nima, quote, "Then he proceeded to ask us if we've ever had an urge to kill. He's like, 'Do you guys have an urge? Have you guys ever had an urge to kill?' And then he said, 'Well, I used to be a good guy. I used to be a cop. But then I just had this urge to kill. So I ran this girl over.' I didn't believe him. He told me a story about how he ran that girl over. Then he kidnapped the girl behind us, and he drove 10 hours from Bend, Oregon, to where we were. Then he shot an old man because the guy show that she was sitting there and she was alive and well. And he said, quote, "If you guys are wondering if I have done dirty things to her, no, I am not that kind of guy," end quote. He said of Kaylee, quote, "She just kept screaming and I had to silence her forever," end quote. After he finished making the video, he asked Andrea to post it on her Facebook and title it "Murderer on the Loose." Now, she didn't want to do that because she said it would be embarrassing to have that on her page, although I'm thinking, what are you worried about being embarrassed for? You've been kidnapped, put it there. But he insisted she do it, and so she fooled him by posting it, but only privately, so like nobody could see it. Now anyway, when they were about 30 miles south of Redding, California, he started speeding at 100 miles an hour, and he called 911, and he told the operator who he was and where he was, and that he wanted to turn himself in. He said, quote, "Just tell them not to be too rough on me," end quote. He explained that he has asthma and he doesn't have his medicine and he's having trouble breathing. And he said, quote, "I do have a gun on me. I'm not gonna flash the gun if you tell them not to shoot me. I don't want to die," end quote. He told the dispatcher that he was responsible for Kaylee's death and that he was wearing a bulletproof vest. So he did pull over and he surrendered to the police. And believe it or not only did they arrest him, they arrested Andrea as well. They put her in handcuffs, they put her in the back of a police car, they booked her in jail. You see, the thing is, nobody had reported her missing. She had been gone for about 12 hours, and her family just assumed that she was with friends or something. It wasn't long enough for them to truly be that worried. So, according to her, quote, "They ended up strip searching me and completely treating me like I was the criminal. I felt 100% violated after everything I had just gone through," end quote. They took her fingerprints, they questioned her, they took her mugshot photo, but ultimately they realized that she was a victim, not a criminal, and she was released the next morning. Luckily, Edwin was not released, so he was immediately interrogated. The first thing they wanted to know was, where is Kaylee's body? And he agreed to draw a map to show them where she was. And at the same time, he explained to them how he had accidentally hit her with his car on the night she went missing. He said, quote, "I didn't even see her. She was wearing all black. I was in a hurry, so it was my fault, and I wasn't expecting anybody, at that time of night. I mean, I didn't hit her that hard. I just bumped with the patrol car with the front rack. She fell down. At first, I thought I killed her, but I didn't hit her that hard. I got out of the car and she was really drunk. Then she looks at me and she starts screaming," end quote. Then he goes she was a prostitute when he first picked her up. He said, quote, "So I drove up to her and I'm like, hey, you want to ride somewhere? I can take you there." So I think she kind of trusted me because of the position. So she gets in the car, in the back seat, of course, and then I asked her, "You said you're a hooker, aren't you?" And then she started screaming. The only way I knew she wasn't a hooker was after reading the news reports, end quote. So the officer said, "So you never hit her with the car?" And Edwin said no, he didn't hit her with the car. He said he had just picked her up. And the officer said, "Well, why did you take away her purse?" And he said, quote, "She was going to use her phone to call 911, end quote. So the police officer pointed out, "Well, that makes no sense. So you picked her up with your car, you hadn't done anything to her that was illegal, but yet you wanted to take her purse so she didn't call the cops on you. Like, that makes zero sense." So the detective said, quote, "If your intent isn't already there to do some kind of harm or some kind of evil to her, some frigging evil, that's there, bro, that's there. You just got to face it down, man. You can't cower away from it. Your thought is, I've got to keep that phone away from her because she's gonna call them before anything bad's happened. You've already made a decision." And Edwin answered him by saying, "I made the decision that time to silence her, to kill her." And then after the confession, Edwin went on to tell the detectives about his urge to kill that he's had for his whole life. He said he had an ex-girlfriend who had an uncle that he wanted to kill, but somehow he had resisted the urge at that time. Now, the detectives asked Edwin to write an apology to Kaylee's family, and he decided he would write the letter just to Kaylee's father because he had seen him in the news. So this is part of what the letter said. Quote, "I've been trying to ask Kaylee for forgiveness, but I don't think her soul hears my crying because God doesn't allow the devil to talk to angels. However, I know Kaylee hears you, and if you find it in your heart, please ask her to forgive me. Please, I beg you, please. I know that I will spend the rest of my life asking God to forgive me, but I don't think he'll hear me. I'm not sure what your name is, but I know for a fact you love your daughter. I read somewhere you were desperately searching for your daughter. I failed you. I failed my community. I failed everyone. I'm really sorry. I beg you. A man like me doesn't deserve the job I had, and I'll never have it again. I'm sorry for wearing the badge. May Kaylee Sawyer rest in peace." End quote. Now, detectives took the map that Edwin had drawn, and they went and they found Kaylee's body laying not far from the highway on top of some rocks. And they took her to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. It was determined that she had died of blunt force trauma, so he had hit her in the head with that boulder repeatedly. Edwin Lara was arraigned on charges of murder, kidnapping, and carjacking, and he pled not guilty even after having confessed. calls within the first 3 hours, and that didn't happen. So his entire confession was thrown out. But luckily, he decided to change his plea to guilty after he realized that if he lost the case, he could wind up with the death penalty. At the sentencing, after all the family and friends gave their victim impact statements, Edwin asked to speak as well. And here is what he said to the family of Kaylee. Quote, "Today I've seen your pain. Today I've seen your hate. I don't have much to say to you at this moment, a single prayer that someday, something I would like to speak to whoever is willing to listen. God Almighty, who art in heaven, although he might deny, I'll ask you to please heal the hearts, all those broken hearts of this community. I ask you, please heal the hearts of this family, of everyone who is in this place today, and may Kaylee Sawyer rest in peace. Amen." End quote. And when he made this speech, he was kind of screaming it up to God, if you can imagine. Now after that, the judge spoke. And she said, quote, "I've lived in Bend almost 30 years, and I've been a judge over 20 years. I've presided over many murder cases, both trials and sentencing. This case stands out for many reasons. I cannot recall any case in Bend that shocked the community to the extent this case has. I think the vulnerability of this victim, Kaylee Sawyer, under all the circumstances, walking alone on a college campus. Some dangerous area? No, a college campus in Bend, Oregon. A campus safety officer stops to give her a ride. Extremely vulnerable. In the course of picking her up, you were not protecting her. You were acting as the predator that you were that evening. You saw this vulnerable young woman as someone you could prey upon. You can sugarcoat it all you want. That's what you did. This is what shocks the community the most. And then, of course, what you did, the incredible brutality. I don't recall another case like it." End quote. He was given life in prison without the chance of parole, and he later received a second life sentence he was actually a police officer. I don't know how they could know what she was thinking, but this is what it said in the lawsuit. And she then became trapped in the car, which was equipped with a cage and doors that wouldn't open from the inside. Also, the uniforms that the campus security wore were very similar to police uniforms. And these campus security people were armed with pepper spray, ballistic vests, body cameras, handcuffs, and a vehicle with a cage. So, a settlement was reached, and Kaylee's family got $2 million. Her family also advocated for change on a state level with Kaylee's Law, which was approved unanimously by the State House and Senate in 2019. It mandates stricter vetting of private security officers. Campuses are now required to conduct nationwide background checks on their officers, and their uniforms must look different than police uniforms. Also, the vehicles must have GPS devices and video systems. They cannot have a red and blue light bar on the top or a cage. And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some of mine. First of all, rest in peace to Kaylee Sawyer, and my heart goes out to her family and friends. Now, what can I say about Edwin Lara that we all don't already know? I guess one of the major things that stands out to me is the fact that his morals were so different from his behavior. Here was a man who was so religious, attended church regularly. Religion was supposedly the biggest thing in his life. And yet, he committed the biggest sin according to his religion, and more than one type of sin. Look at all the things he did. Now, if he would have killed her and then gone straight to turn himself in and said he couldn't resist the urge, as he had talked about his urges, he couldn't resist the urge, and he had done a terrible thing, and that would be one thing. But that's not even what he did. He just sat with knowing what he did for a couple of days. Then he confessed it to his wife, but with a lie, which is another sin, right? Takes her gun, takes the car, takes off, kidnaps another innocent person. He makes her take sleeping pills. He was going to essay her, okay, but he didn't because of her ingenious lie. He goes on, he shoots an elderly man, he carjacks a family. This guy just didn't stop. One offense after the next. How could he possibly be religious at all? It boggles my mind. And then he has the nerve to write a letter to Kaylee's father asking for him to ask Kaylee to forgive him. Why? What have you done to deserve any forgiveness anyway? How could you even write totally nuts. But that is about all I have to say about this horrible case. I'm glad that at least some legislation came out of it, and I hope that a lot of people are